G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. When we're drawing freehand in ink, how can we maximise our chance of putting our lines on the paper accurately? I've thought hard about my process, how I observe, how I think, how I strategize, how I actually put the lines on the paper, and I've reduced them to 10 points or 10 techniques that I use that I'm going to demonstrate now in this drawing of a staircase in Robin Hood Bay in England. So let's start. And the very first thing I'm doing, of course, is to find eye level. That will determine the pattern that all the other lines follow. This is eye level. So below this line, horizontal lines increasingly angle downwards, and above this line, they increasingly angle upwards. And to draw accurately, I have to choose a place that's going to be relatively simple to draw and which I can establish as a reference. And in looking at this scene, I think this bottom post for this railing is the best bet. And from here, I can move across and do this stairway, get this slope in. And then I can move up with more posts for the railing. And then I can position this join here between these two walls, and even just observing that in fact this wall and this wall here do not flow together. There is a separation there, and this wall is further back. Therefore the horizontal lines separating the courses of stonework are closer together here, further away than they are here. So careful observation at the start makes for accurate line work, and also just being careful to see which things I'm going to have to draw first, so that I don't have lines crossing other lines that aren't meant to cross. So if I want to draw this foliage in here, I have to do it before I draw this long straight line for the downpipe. So all these things I'm working out in my head before I put the pen on the paper. I often at this very early stage do relatively light lines that I get by holding my pen at quite an oblique angle to the paper and moving it fairly quickly, so it's not got time to deposit a large amount of ink, because that lets me adjust the line later with less visual impact if I need to. Or I can equally use it as a guideline if I think it's in the right place. When I've got, say, this left hand side of the step sorted, I can use it to align the left hand riser line. So these are the treads horizontally and the risers that come upwards. And so this riser is in just about that far from the end. And this is more a series of points, and you'll notice I haven't put a line here because I don't want a line there, but I've put a series of points that will just help me to align, so I can see that this step didn't come far away enough. And what I'm going to do is, another reason why my line work looks so accurate, is that when I make mistakes I correct them, and then I look for ways that I can disguise the mistakes. And I can see here that I'm going to have the chance to put some hatching on these risers because of the shade that they have on them, and that's going to let me hide, I think, this adjustment here that I'm making. So I'm going to use this now much the way I used this post. This post helped me establish proportions and size and scale for this lower staircase, but now this as a unit will help me work out what's happening elsewhere. Now I have this line here that ends about here in relation to here. So I'm going to just lightly establish this. Now another way I get accurate lines is to move my whole arm where possible. And I find that's especially with straight lines. Another thing I do is I do a dress rehearsal line. I get a sense of both what it feels like and is it going to end up in the right place. And I also do some lightish lines. So I think that's not straight actually, so I need to come over more. And this smudgy mark here that I've carelessly made by resting my pen on the paper while I aligned it instead of just off the paper, I'm confident I can make that look a whole lot less obvious by the time I finish the drawing. So now I'm going to work on just continuing a little bit more of this here. Then I plan to do this doorway, get this line. I'm not going to tilt this wall, and I'm going to straighten it because it's only tilted because of the effect of the camera lens distorting what we're seeing. It was a straight line in life. I'm adding this hatching now because it helps make clearer in my drawing to me now the proportions of the stairs. Because I also want to move this line over slightly as well. Now, all through this drawing, I'm going to be aligning my lines with what I've already drawn according to the reference. So this line here, I can see it lines up with the top of this step, which is this step. So this spot here is this spot here. So the challenge is to keep everything accurate and in proportion, but it's much harder at the start. It becomes much easier as the drawing progresses. Now, I'm going to draw the stairs further up from this spot with a finer pen. I'm using the 0.3. Another way that makes it easier to get accurate line work is to use the right size pen. I intend to draw this section here, across here, and up here, and along here with a 3. And then these stairs, this wall, and whatever's up the top here with a 2. Now you'll notice I did some dress rehearsals for my line, get some muscle memory, get a sense of how it feels for my arm, and where lines are at an angle, I am constantly checking the angle. I'm going to finish this section of the stairway underneath. I've been misled by this angle here, which is not a perspective angle. So again, I keep my line work accurate by correcting mistakes, trusting I can hide or disguise or minimize to some degree the line that's not quite in the right place. And this apex here of this little pediment, I can see aligns pretty much with there. I will hatch in a way that reflects the underlying form, or sometimes in a way that reflects the perspective angles as well. Now we've got one step down here that we haven't done, which if I draw a straight line up here to a line actually comes out much further than we might just think if we're just looking at what we've already drawn. And it's got to come out to that dot that I made. So now I want to concentrate on this left side of the staircase. The most significant object is this doorway, which is also important to align carefully because the top of the doorway aligns with this perspective angle, which is picked up by the join in the courses of stonework. So my thinking, my planning to have accurate lines is I'm going to put this line in first, measuring the angle from this point here. Then I'm going to position this vertical line here, and then within this space I know I need to fan out the perspective angles in that pattern. And then when I go higher, they fan up in the other direction. So again, I don't try and work out where to place the downpipe by measuring this distance or estimating this distance or angle. I do it by going straight across from here to here, straight across from here to about there. So now, as I talked at the start, I need to put in this foliage, which I think is a really nice contrast to all the stonework. And I can work out how far up it comes because it really comes up level just above there. So again, we use alignment with what we've drawn to help position accurately our lines for the things that we're still drawing. I think now I want to complete this building on this side. So I'm going to work at getting these perspective angles between the courses, probably at this point level from the door up. Now, because we've tilted this vertical slightly this way, that will actually reduce these angles very slightly. While our eye level is pretty much here, because the courses between the stone blocks on my drawing didn't actually line up with that spot. This spot is not that spot, and therefore my eye level is actually just slightly higher. It's about here. So I just had to make adjustments to my courses so that they adopted the proper fan shape pattern above and below an eye level, which actually in this case doesn't really have a horizontal line to make clear where it is. And now I can position this gutter in because I can align it with this upper section of wall here. Now I need to get this angle correct because this actually establishes the perspective angle at the top of this wall. And sometimes when we do a few too many lines, and it can be easy to mistake, is this the bottom of the guttering or is this, where it does matter, a little hatching can stop us from making a mistake with our line subsequent to that. I'm now going to measure off where these courses are, and then I'll just spread them between here and here. So now I want to establish the course lines in this perspective pattern for the rest of this wall. This angle that comes down to here, and this sort of lines up with about there. So I'm now switching to a 0.2 to do this section and this section. And look, I hope you noticed with what I did here that I did shift my strategy partway through. I was going to draw the guidelines for these courses of stone, but there were so many lines in almost every possibility of space, and most of them incorrect. I decided it would be more accurate, I have a greater chance of not ruining this drawing that I'd invested quite a bit of time in already, if I instead just paced up with my lines and disregarded the lines I'd already drawn, and simply worked on establishing lines that completed the fan pattern between this line and this line. And even this line, I brought it back slightly to make it easier to make the adjustment of the angle from line to line. How am I ensuring accurate lines with this remaining part? Well, I'm aligning the top of the stairs with what I've already done, which is here. So this top step is really just above there. And this line comes down, and then it comes down, and then it comes out, and then it comes down. It's not a straight line. So here we have our stairs from the village of Robin Hood Bay in England. How do I keep my lines accurate when I'm drawing freehand directly in ink? Firstly, I pay extra attention to observe carefully. I'm not just looking at the line I'm about to draw, but I'm looking at the lines that are around it as well. I need to plan the line. Where am I going to put it on the paper? Where am I going to start? How am I going to progress what I do? I need to use a variety of marks on the paper. Sometimes I can draw a line confidently, directly, quite heavily onto the drawing, particularly in the later parts of the drawing. But at other times, and particularly at the start, light lines, or lines that really are just a series of dots in a straight line, are a better way to go to keep options open and also to be able to be disguised later on. Very important for me is alignment, drawing a smaller part very carefully and then using that as sort of like a ruler to measure off other parts both vertically and horizontally from it when I need to position them in what I'm drawing. To check all my angles carefully using my pen, whether they're perspective angles or whether they're simply angles that appear for some other reason. Sometimes it's helpful to practice my arm movements or my hand movements, or just to get some muscle memory, particularly if it's a curve that I have to draw. There are no curves in this drawing, but sometimes practicing the curve in one direction or the other, or in both directions, is a good way to ensure accuracy when we actually have the nib touching the paper. Correcting mistakes when I make them is an important way to draw accurate lines in our drawing, not leaving lines that are wrong if I can possibly correct them. Sometimes it's also possible to hide mistakes. There are a couple of times where I pushed these stairs just a bit further to the left to make them a bit wider, because I decided they weren't quite wide enough when I first drew them in, and I had less of the drawing to guide me as to their exact proportions. And then, if possible, hide our mistakes. And I was able to hide some incorrect lines up here with a bit of hatching. So on my count, that's 10 techniques or strategies that I use when I draw to give myself the best chance of drawing accurate lines when I'm drawing freehand in ink. G'day, I'm Travers. I hope you found these 10 points helpful, and why not print off a copy of this photo from my channel community page and have a go drawing it yourself and using as many of those 10 techniques or strategies as you think you need to keep your lines accurate. But look, whatever you draw and however you're drawing it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.